Howdy, y'all. I have good news and I have bad news. The good news is I'm the only thing that stands between you and whatever good stuff is in there. The bad news is I'm jet-lagged and we have 70 slides. I'm not joking. So my name is Goodman-Wilson. I am a developer advocate at GitHub. I have been told I look a lot like Hohenheim. I mean, it's... I'm just not wearing the vest and tie. I'm also the owner of an organization in Europe called the DevRelCon. It's an informal professional organization for DevRellers. We meet in Paris and Amsterdam once a month. If you think you might be interested in something like this, let's talk afterwards. But the tech credentials aren't what's especially interesting to me today. Oh yeah, I took this yesterday. I'm also a Densha Otaku. I'm pretty into the train nerdery, so I'm so happy to be here in Tokyo. No, what I actually came here to talk about a little bit today is my academic background. So as Alex pointed out in his talk, yeah, he is over there. My background is actually in academic philosophy. I spent many years as a professor teaching intro to logic, intro to Java, not what you were expecting. You thought I was going to say C++. And I'm really passionate about teaching. I'm really passionate about technology as well. And that's what's gotten me into DevRel. And so I want to ask, how many of you have been students? Students, ever? Like, a lot of people, right? How many of you had a teacher that really got you excited about a particular topic and made you very enthusiastic about it? You did. I'm not actually going to call on you. I just want to see you raise of hands. So then the question is like, what are the properties of a teacher that gets you excited or enthusiastic about a topic? And the one that, well, yeah, go ahead, shout it out if you got one.
A connection.
A connection to?
Between myself and the subject.
Yeah, he connects you to the subject? Okay. Anybody else?
Their own enthusiasm.
Their own enthusiasm. That's the one I was looking for. But I'll take more. There's one over there. Their passion for the subject too, right? Enthusiasm is infectious.
Patience to answer very stupid questions.
Yeah, that's a really good one. Patience, because there are no stupid questions, right? That's what they always say. That's a lie. There are stupid questions. Patience is the really important thing there, right? Yeah, but enthusiasm is what I'm looking for. So there's a funny thing that happens with enthusiasm. It's infectious, yes, right? It spreads to other people in the room. And when you see somebody who's really enthusiastic about something, who acts like they know a lot about it, you begin to trust them, right? That's part of that enthusiastic bond that they've shared with you, is that you trust them. You trust them implicitly. You don't even think about it. It's just something that happens. Maybe later you go back and you review what happened, and you're like, what was I thinking? But that's not really common, right? So I want to talk about trust. I want to talk about trust in the context of my experience teaching. And I want to talk about trust as a theoretical framework for developer relations, because a lot of what we do is teaching, but as we've seen with a lot of the other talks today, most of what we do really is about connecting with people. And teaching is a part of that, but trust is the currency that we trade in when we do developer relations. So I want to make this claim that developer relations is at its core. I'm not going to try to redefine it. This is more like a property of developer relations. It's about building trust at scale. It's about building trust because when developers don't trust us, when they don't trust our apps, not using our product is the easy decision for them to make. Of course, we want them to use our product, which means we need to get them to trust our product. But we also have to do it at scale because, you know, we're in technology. We do everything at scale. It's not enough to just reach out to 15 or 30 people in a classroom, get them enthusiastic, and then next year move on to another 15 or 30. No, we want to move faster than that. And trust is this very interesting property that it takes time to build up. It takes effort. It takes repeated connections. But it takes only an instant to break down, right? And so there's an inherent contradiction in the idea of building trust at scale. And I want to work through that with you today and try to understand how it is that in developer relations we can break that tension or break that contradiction. And I want to talk about all these activities that we've talked about today in other sessions, right? So teaching, writing content, giving talks, starting community groups and ambassador groups and things like that. I want to argue that trust is at the core of each of these activities that we do. And when we think about them that way, it becomes obvious when we should do what. So, as I said, developers won't use a tool that they don't trust, right? Trust is built through developing close personal relationships, and so we as developer relations people become the public face of our product. The public face because trust requires that face-to-face relationship, right? This is why we go out and meet people. We share our enthusiasm for the product because when developers trust us, they're going to trust our product, right? We are like the human face of the product, quite literally, not just metaphorically, but quite literally. And so pursuing developers at scales means pursuing trust at scale, and holy fuck, this is going to be hard. Like, I'm not going to lie. This contradiction is very, very difficult to get past. So the perspective that I want to give here is borrowed somewhat from John Britton's talk last year here. He's my new boss, so of course I have to mention him. Hi, John. Scoop, right? So this is the model that we use in developer marketing at GitHub for thinking about the activities that we engage in and the timing of those activities. And Scoop is an acronym. It stands for, let's see if this is going to work. Is this going to work? Yes! Support, content, outreach, operations, and programs. I'm not going to go into this in a lot of detail. You can go watch John's talk from last year and get the 45-minute deep dive into all of this. But what I want to do is talk about this in the context of developer relations, right? So this is sort of an all-encompassing measure of the things that we do, although we generally focus on what we call outreach. And trust is, in my opinion, what makes all of this hang together nice and neat. Yes, it's Scoop. You can tell I've only added some of these slides in the last minute, so I'm not 100% prepared for all of them. So how do we do this? How do we go about building trust at scale? And like all journeys, it begins with a single step. Get one person to trust you. I'd like to think we've all done that at least once, but what does this look like? Right? Because this is the thing ultimately that we're going to scale. Let's talk about this in some depth. Now, I'm a graph theoretician. That's what I did in philosophy, so I represent everything with graphs. Graphs are circles and arrows that connect them. You can guess what these circles are. One of those is me, and the other one is somebody else that I want to build a bond of trust with. And the arrows represent the bonds of trust, right? So how do we go about building this, the first step in scaling something? So the first thing that we need to do is we need to identify our audience. I mean, so some of this is going to sound like it goes without saying, but I think it's worth going over in a little bit of detail. If you find the wrong audience, you're not going to be able to form a connection with them, right? If I want to talk about the GitHub API, right, and I go to an oil painting class, it's not going to work, right? They don't really care about what I'm going to say. There's no need for them to trust me. They're certainly not going to get enthusiastic about GitHub API, no matter how enthusiastic I am. They're there to learn how to oil paint, right? So find your audience. That's actually pretty easy, generally. Identify an exchange of value. So an interesting thing about trust is that it's reinforced when you give them something that makes them feel valued, right? So in DevRel, what's the usual medium of exchange? Anyone? Joe. Stickers! Yeah, you're not even paying attention, it's okay.
She said it fast.
Oh, I didn't hear you, I'm sorry. Yeah, so stickers, right? Stickers is an easy one, unless you're Slack and then it's socks, right? Which is a pretty good step up. Maybe it's advice, right? Maybe it's helpful, timely information. Doesn't actually matter what it is, as long as it actually has value to the person that you're sharing with. But it's not a one-way relationship, it's a two-way relationship. People feel empowered when they can give something to you in return, right? They feel valuable, they feel needed, right? And so the values of the exchanges of value that we engage in should always be bidirectional. We give them a sticker, we give them a piece of advice, and we make them feel heard. We listen to their stories, right? We commiserate with their problems. Oh yeah, that API endpoint. I know the one you're talking about, that's terrible. Even small things like that, make them feel heard, make them feel important, make them more likely to trust you, more likely to share in your enthusiasm. And so reach out and have a conversation, right? When we come to an event like this, or you go to another event, like, you have to have that conversation as the first step. So you've identified your audience, you've found the exchange of value, now find somebody, talk with them, engage in that exchange of value, right? And then keep the conversation going. Follow up with them even after that first initial meeting, right? Trust is something that's slow to build, and it requires repeated contact over time, right? It requires, more importantly, consistency, right? If you're consistent in your actions, if you're consistent in your interactions, then they know the next time they have a problem, they come to you, you're going to respond. I mean, that's exactly what trust is, right? Is this prediction of how you're going to act. And if you follow up and you're consistent, you're giving them that framework to make those kinds of predictions. The most important thing is to give a shit, right? We talk about developers having a finely tuned sense of bullshit, right? That they can detect this a mile away. I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's not just developers, it's human beings. Or like, human beings can detect when you're trying to use them for your own ends. Human beings can detect when you're being inauthentic with them, inauthentic in your relationship with them. None of this works if you don't give a shit. It doesn't matter if you're dealing with developers or your family, right? You have to earnestly care about this other person, right? So all of these things put together, right, now are a foundation for building that first relationship of trust. If you can do this, congratulations. You forged a bond of trust. Now do it again. And again. And again. Because we're working towards scale. Okay, so we've done this a few times. We've gone out and met people face to face. For me, this is the most fundamental DevRel activity, is these face-to-face meetings where we actually start forming these individual bonds of trust and we cultivate them carefully over time, right? The technology doesn't matter, the content doesn't matter. It's these relationships that to me matter. But this is only gonna get you so far, right? There's only so many people you can meet at once. There's only so many relationships that you can maintain at the same time, right? So the next step then, for those of us who are engineers, we know the answer to any sort of scaling problem is parallelization, right? Unless you're a node programmer. Ooh. Single-threaded. No, I'm joking, of course. How do you parallelize yourself? Well, you do like what I'm doing right now. You give talks and workshops, right? Instead of having a single interaction with a single person, you have an interaction with a room at once. You lose a little bit of the ability to form a relationship because it's not so easy for you to talk back to me, right? I can talk at you, and you're forced to sit there and listen. So I try to make it a little interactive to maintain this feeling that we're having a conversation. But there's a limit to what can be done there. And when you give talks and workshops, now we can start building graphs like this, right? Not just the one-on-one, but the one-to-many. It's still going to be slow, but it's going to be all right. So how do we do this? So find a topic that matters to your audience. So I had to tell you how to put together a talk, but I think, again, it's worth iterating on the fundamentals here. If you don't have a topic that matters to your audience, they're not going to show up. They're not going to listen to what you have to say. You're going to have a missed opportunity to form a relationship. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. But make them the protagonist in a story. So remember, in the one-on-one relationship, you want an exchange of value that makes them feel heard, makes them feel valued, makes them feel like you're doing something for them. When you're having a one-on-many conversation where it's very unidirectional, you can't have that exchange of value, so you do something somewhat different. You make them the protagonist in a story. You're the protagonist in this story. It's not the best story that I've ever told, but it's not half bad. Because the idea now is we're going through a journey of building this trust network together, right? But what you want to do is engage them in the story, make them protagonists. It makes them feel good about themselves, but more to the point, it helps them identify themselves in you, identify their own experiences and your experiences. And that goes a long way, actually, towards being an exchange of value. And in doing this, ideally, you earn your audience's respect, right? And then you get the chance to meet people. So after this talk, I'm probably going to talk to a bunch of you. I mean, that's just what we do at conferences, right? And so giving a talk is a wonderful way, in addition to this sort of interaction, where it's one-to-many, but then to create the necessary context for building one-on-one relationships afterwards, right? And so it gives us, well, simply more opportunities to expand our trust network. So if you do this, congratulations, you've parallelized yourself. You've forged multiple bonds of trust at once. Now do it again. And again. And again. Over and over and over. All right, so we're meeting people one-on-one. We're holding talks and workshops where we're able to reach a larger audience at once, and then leverage that to have even more one-on-one meetings. Again, we're going to reach limits. There's only so many meetups that we can go to. There's only so much traveling that we can do. Oh, God, I'm tired, right? We need help. But the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to delegate not to people, but to, we are going to delegate to people. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. We are going to delegate to other people. So how many people run their own meetup? You do? A few people do. So what's the nice thing about running a meetup? Well, not running it. Not running it. No, that's the nice thing about not running a meetup. Lead generation? You can do lead generation with a lot of these. I don't expect you're going to actually know what I'm going to say. For me, the nice thing to holding a meetup is I don't have to be up on stage talking. I can let somebody else do the work. That's why I said delegate in the first one, right? So now we're finding other people to help us, and we're convincing them to do the hard work for us, as though running a meetup weren't hard work. It's basically a full-time job in its own right. But we're getting others to build these bonds of trust with us, right? Now it looks something like this. And again, the bonds of trust are weakened because now we have an intermediary. But if I can bring good speakers to an audience, this is another form of exchange of value, and we can do this at a much larger scale than the one-on-one meetings because, you have an audience, right? So I invite speakers. The speakers offer something useful, some new insights, some advice on technology, something like that. Maybe some stickers too from a different company than mine, because they're getting tired of my stickers now. And that's very good. And then they know you're the organizer, they know you're the sponsor, right? And they project whatever enthusiasm and trust that they built up for those speakers onto you, and that's pretty awesome. The process for this, of course, looks much the same. It shouldn't be a surprise. Find a topic that matters to your audience. Context is super important. Find other people to talk about it. That's actually the hard part, right? That's not always so easy. Offer your audience something of value, right? So it's not just finding anybody to talk about it, it's finding people who have something interesting, worthwhile to say. And then meet people. Once again, it's another opportunity to go out there and meet people and forge those one-on-one relationships. Always take advantage of this, right? So for me, a DevRel event of any scale is only worthwhile if there's a chance to meet people. And if you do that, congratulations, you've just started a community, like just. So you need to do it again. And again. And again. Ideally every month, right? Because consistency, again, is the foundation of trust. And if you aren't holding your meetup every month, it falls apart. We all know this, right? You need the momentum. You need the consistency. You need people to know that, yes, last Thursday of the month in the evening is the meetup at their place, and it's going to be great. Because the moment that you stop doing that, they're going to stop coming, and the whole thing sort of falls apart, right? And you discover just how fragile trust is. All right, so people, unfortunately, are the limiting factor in really scaling trust. Because to have a face-to-face interaction requires us to be in the same room. There's, for example, only so many speakers that we can have in here. There's only so many participants that we can have in here. And so the next step is to build trust surrogates. And for me, this is where content comes into play as developer advocacy. It's not the first thing that I do, it's actually one of the last things that I do. Because if I start writing content and I put it out there on the web, nobody's gonna see it. How many of you read my blog? Okay, good. I was afraid somebody might raise your hand. I don't have a blog, but you don't know that. You can imagine that I do. None of you read it. Why? Because you don't have any reason to, right? I haven't done anything to promote it. You probably hadn't heard of me before today, so you had no reason to go search it out. I don't actually have one, so don't go looking for it. But point being, like, there's no sense in just putting content out there into the void. The content is out there to strengthen the bonds that you've had, or that you've made, right, through consistency and repeated interactions with people over time. And when you have those existing relationships with people, then it's a way to scale your reach, right? So we want to create evergreen content, something that can stay up there for forever and ever. And when we do that, like now we can generate something like this. And the interesting feature of this is, you know, this first line of smiley faces may be the people that I've already have relationships with, that I've met through meetups or meeting people or whatever. But when I have content out there on the web, they can see that. That strengthens the relationship between us because here's another item of value for them. But then they can also share it with other people that I haven't yet met, right? And when they share it with other people, that grows the network just that much faster, right? And the more people who have a reason to share it, the more people they're going to share it with. So this is why I think this is important to do very late in the game, is because it becomes much easier to leverage the network effects of sharing. Much later in the game when you have an established network for whom this sort of thing is valuable. You can imagine what the steps look like. Find a topic that matters to your audience. Write about it goodly. You lose credibility if you don't write well in whatever language that you're targeting, right? This is a really important part of establishing trust relationships when you're creating content online. It has to look like it comes from somebody who's knowledgeable. It has to look like it comes from somebody who's expert. This is, I think, quite important. And publish it and promote it. Promote it to your existing network. Get your existing network to share it and build it out there. And this expands your network, right? Turn it into a talk. And then guess what? Take that talk and give it, and then use that to meet people, right? So each layer here is reinforcing the layer that's come before it, right? So everything that we're going to do is going to create opportunities to do the thing I talked about before, and ultimately it's all going to create opportunities for us to go out and meet people. So for example, this talk actually started as an article on Medium. Actually a series of articles on Medium that I wrote over a year ago. I've turned it into a talk. I've given it a few places. It's given me the opportunity to meet people. Like ultimately, that was always the goal, is to use these to meet people. And if you can do that, well, congratulations, you started expanding your community, right? For me, content just is a tool for expanding your community. Now do it again, right? One post does not a blog make. And again, and again. You're sensing a theme. All right, so what's the last step? We've talked about this several times today. I've really loved this step. This is empowering ambassadors, right? So for me, Joe has opinions. Other people in this room have opinions. But for me, the goal of an ambassador network is to clone yourself, to make many yous, right? Or in the terminology of GitHub, we call it creating super fans, right? These are people who love the product so much that they want to help us to pass on what we're doing. And now it looks like this. Right? For every clone of you that you can make, they can go through all these previous steps themselves. And so multiply the network that you can build, by 100% for each person that you add. And you can add a lot of people to an ambassador network. How many ambassadors do we have right now, Joe, in the education program?
Just hit 100 in 21 countries.
Can you imagine that? 100 Joe Nashes. That's heartwarming, actually.
Pretty good.
Some of them are giving you a run for your money, I say.
More than some.
Yeah, it's quite impressive, right? So this is the key, right? This is now the jump to where we're starting to scale things. So identify the people who you trust most. This is super important because if you can't trust them, they're not really gonna do much for you. Auth0 has some very interesting ways of identifying the people that they trust. I'm afraid I wasn't at the talk, but I'm sure this came up. Oh, this came up, yes. I mean, you have criteria. Yes, we have criteria, definitely. I don't know what they are, but they're in Joe's head. He just says, these are the people I trust, and then things happen. Yeah, well, there you go, training, that's a huge one, right? So identify the people that you already trust, people that you already have outstanding relationships with, because these are the people who are going to be the most powerful, who are going to give you the most leverage. And then here's the fun part: empower them. Right? Give them opportunities to talk. Give them opportunities to write. Give them opportunities to meet people. Give them opportunities to shine, right? So these are people that you really need to pay attention to. You need to give them the opportunity to feel really good about what they're doing. Because if they don't feel good about what they're doing, they're not going to keep doing it. And there are a lot of ways to make people feel good about what they're doing, of course. But the most important thing is to make them feel cool, I think. Joe, I don't know. But when they feel cool, like they love what they're doing, they're going to do more of it. They're going to be motivated internally because you have given them, as somebody mentioned earlier, the social capital that they crave. And when you can give them the social capital that they crave, you know, they're going to speak about your product in glowing terms. They're going to reach larger audiences. They're going to have enthusiasm, right? It comes back to that. They're going to have the enthusiasm for the product that you have, and that enthusiasm is going to be that much more infectious. And make them feel powerful, because if they don't feel powerful, they're not going to go out there and do any of this in the first place. Make them feel valuable. So, at this stage, you can finally say, you've begun to scale. That's not bad. I'm going to do it again. And again. And one more time. All right, so the key to building trust is giving a shit. Right? I said this before, I'm going to say it again. It's really important, because when you give a shit, people can tell. When you give a shit, that enthusiasm is coming from a genuine place. People can feel it. People will share in it, and they're going to help you spread it. So find what gets you excited. Find moments to spread this infectious enthusiasm. Right? Create the moments if you have to. And indeed, we often do have to. And nerd the fuck out. Right? That's probably the easiest way for us to build up enthusiasm, right? I think we're all nerds here in some way. Lord knows Joe's tired of hearing me talk about trains. Yeah, it's pretty much constant. But you know what? It's a lot of fun, and I don't care. Because I get excited about it, and weirdly, I can get other people who would never care about it to get excited about it. And we can do that with our products, too. It's really not that hard. And people will follow you when you're being your authentic self. But there's a converse to this that I think is really, really important. And I felt this myself before. If you can't muster enthusiasm for what you're doing, if you can't find that spark for your product, if you can't nerd out over it, like, stop and think about it very carefully, because you're not going to be effective. You're not going to be able to spread this enthusiasm. You're not going to be able to form the bonds of trust that are the foundation for your entire DevRel program. And maybe consider doing something else. Not saying don't do DevRel, but find something that you can be passionate about in your role. So, we're done. Scaling trust requires, right, an existing network of trust that you can leverage. It requires us to jump into activities that don't scale. Meeting people one-on-one does not scale. It really doesn't scale, but we have to do it. There's no choice. There's no other way to form bonds of trust than through this slow, individualized process. It requires us to share our infectious enthusiasm, and it requires finding and empowering people not only who can help, but who want to help. I see people taking pictures, so I'm going to wait for the last slide. Okay, time's up. All right, so here's a quote. I love this quote. Fires can't be made with dead embers, nor can enthusiasm be stirred by spiritless men. James A. Baldwin, an American writer. I think this is very, very true of what we do. We have to have, well, we can't be dead embers. We have to have a spark in us. And when we have that spark, like, amazing things are possible. So, I'm Don Goodman-Wilson. I work for GitHub. If you like what we're doing, we have a GitHub developer program. I would encourage you to sign up, learn how to build on the GitHub API. That's it. That's the only thing I'm going to say about it. Also, we're hiring for DevRel in Tokyo. That's the magic URL that you want to use right there. Maybe it will be one of you. Who knows? Last time I was at DevRelCon, I got hired by GitHub, so miracles do happen. Thank you.